Hey there, I'm Tyler, and this is the Everyday Dad Podcast. At Everyday Dad, we tell stories. Our goal is to make you laugh, make you think, maybe cry, but ultimately, we want to help you to be the best dad that you can be. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's get going. Thank you, everybody, for joining into the Everyday Dad podcast. My name is Tyler, and today I have my guest online. It is he's Roger Vogel, and he actually has a podcast for veterans. So I will make sure to go check that out in the show notes. And Roger, maybe throughout the episode you can touch on that. It's called Tracer Burnout, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Roger, you're married, 4 kids.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess for starters, maybe go ahead and just give us a little quick bio, if you will, just who you
Yeah,
are.
sure.
Yeah.
Of course. So, again, name's Roger. I live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is here on the doorstep of what I still call Fort Bragg, now officially called Fort Liberty. So, here in southeastern North Carolina, I was an Army brat. So, I grew up in several places, but this being one of them. So, the Fayetteville, Fort Bragg area. And I spent most of my Army career here as well. So, I recently retired
Nice.
earlier this summer from the Army after a little over 20 years.
Dang.
And we decided we wanted to stick around. My lovely wife of 16 and a half years now is from here. She's one of those rare birds who's from Fayetteville, but not affiliated with the military. Her dad
Interesting.
worked at the Kelly Springfield tire plant up on the north end of town. It's now Goodyear, but so kind of an industrial working class family, and we met and fell in love, and yeah, we have 4 kids.
Nice.
And we have lots of my folks retired here. Her entire family's here. She's one of 5.
Oh, wow.
So all her brothers and sisters are in the area here. We've got all the cousins, and it's pretty wild. And then my sister lives down in South Carolina. So family's very important to us. We chose to retire here.
That's
So,
awesome. That's super cool. Yeah.
yeah.
So I live in Southern Oregon. My grew up in Wyoming. Then my parents moved to Southern Oregon, and then so my wife and I came out here to Southern Oregon. And yes, having family around is so helpful. It's super awesome. I can imagine the stories that you have of being in the military for 20 years.
Yeah, sure.
It could go for a while. So a couple of quick things. I guess we'll do a couple of icebreaker questions maybe to get started. So first one is, what is your most treasured possession?
My most treasured possession. So I'm going to be superficial here and
Okay.
talk about, things and belongings, not
Sure.
people and abstract stuff like that.
Sure.
So let's see. My most treasured possession. Do I have to still be in possession of it, or could it be something from the past?
Sure, something from the past.
Okay. Oh man. I'm a Jeep lover.
Okay.
So the first thing that pops into my mind is when I was in senior in high school. It was really my dad's Jeep, although I like to falsely claim that it was mine, but it
Nice.
was mine for most of my senior year of high school, and then
Yeah.
a couple years of college until it finally keeled over. I had a 1988 Jeep Cherokee with the straight 6-cylinder engines, the old white with the big black Yakima rack on the top, and we'd go
Nice.
put the big Mad River canoe on the top of that thing
Yeah.
and take it out.
That's awesome.
I love that probably that white Jeep was one of my favorite things I ever had, and I hated to see it go, but
Yeah.
unfortunately these things don't last forever.
No, they don't. I made the unfortunate decision of buying a Jeep Liberty.
I had one of those too.
And yeah, I was happy when I traded it in.
What year was it?
I couldn't. I would guess 09 maybe, but I could be off on that. 2 days after I got it, the catalytic converter went out, and I had to take it back to the dealership, and I pitched a fit, and they fixed it for me. Yeah, it was.
Chrysler's Jeeps, to be specific, and I'm not a like grease monkey. This isn't my thing, but I've had enough Jeeps at this point to know the transmissions on these things are good. The motors, the engines, the suspensions, all that stuff is good. The electrical systems in Jeeps are always garbage. So you just have to, buyer beware.
Yeah, it was. It had subs in it. The sound system was awesome. We would drive down the
That's all
road.
that really matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but it was not the best car. But second question.
Okay.
Um, what do you value most in your friends?
Friends, man. So I'm a man of a certain age now, and I'm in my mid 40s, and
Okay.
so I've accumulated a large stable of friends over the years. But when it really comes down to my circle now, it's actually very very small.
Mm,
So loyalty
okay.
above all things. You really value that, especially as you get older.
Hmm. Oh, that's a good one.
Would
I
you
like
agree?
that. I think so. Yeah, I think loyalty is huge. I know my wife and I have this like not a saying or like a we appreciate friends that we use a phrase that we don't have to be on for, that are just kind of
Hmm.
easy going. Like we can come
Totally
over
know what that
and
means.
yeah, there's a pile of dishes in the sink and it really doesn't matter because they don't care. And so yeah, I think that's kind of what goes for us.
Putting on the Ritz. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's let's keep it low key and easy. But no, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
So hey, let's get into some stories.
Okay.
So what I kind of like, I guess the niche of what I'm trying to do with the Everyday Dad podcast is hear stories from dads of how you have handled being a dad. Um, I would like, I'd love to hear success stories of how you did it well. And then maybe challenging stories of maybe you didn't handle it so well, but you learned something, all with the heart of, encouraging dads to, hey, you're not alone in this crazy adventure. Nobody's going to do it perfect. And these are the things that I've learned. And I can only imagine with your military background, that definitely has altered the way you handle kids, but that's not the right way of saying it. Kind of
Yeah. Well, I
shaped.
mean,
Yeah.
it's a very different perspective,
Mhm.
for sure, because the circumstances in which you're parenting is often going to be very different from what people are experiencing.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if you have some stories that you want to hit us with, I'd love to
Yeah,
hear it.
sure.
Yeah.
So maybe from the beginning. So
Yeah.
my wife and I, when we we wanted to have kids from the beginning, so that was I highly encourage for younger people, or maybe not younger people, but those who are still courting and seeking a life mate, right? Make sure you discuss these really important values up front. I've had several very dear friends of mine, guy friends, who kind of told their wives that they were okay with having kids because they figured that's what they wanted to hear, and then at once they got married, surprise, I'm not really that interested in having kids. Didn't really end very well for the marriage. So
Ouch. Dang. Yeah.
so we discussed from the outset we wanted to have kids, and
Yeah.
we decided somewhere between 3 and 5.
Okay.
My wife came from a
Hmm.
big family. I just had one sibling,
Gotcha.
one older sister. Like I said earlier, my
Hmm.
wife was one of 5. So
Hmm.
so we got married the week I got home from Iraq.
Hmm.
So my second combat deployment, I was here in the 82nd Airborne Division here, Fort Bragg. I came home on, we called it R&R, which is rest and recuperation leave, which was a nice thing Uncle Sam did for the people that were deployed. And I
Yeah.
came home, bought a ring, put it
Hmm.
on her finger, went back to Iraq for a few months, came home. Just as a kind of an aside, here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Cumberland County, the Justice of the Peace
Hmm.
is not located in a courthouse. They are at the detention facility here. So we got married the week I got home in a jail. That's a
Jail.
true story.
That's awesome.
Yep. So maybe there's some kind of deeper meaning or metaphor buried within.
Maybe. Yeah.
Uh, so we did have a big, beautiful wedding several months later with all our friends and family in a big church, and did all the right stuff. So,
Nice. Nice.
but we didn't want to spend another moment without each other.
Yeah.
So
Good.
So we got married, and about 2.5 years later, we had our first child. So I was in some pretty rigorous Army training here, very, very prolonged training pipeline here in Fort Bragg area. We call it the Q course, the qualification course.
Okay.
And it was a planned pregnancy. It's exactly what we wanted, and we
Mm.
found out we were having a baby girl, and we had her, and she was born in February. And about a month after she was born, she had really, really, really bad RSV slash bronchiolitis,
Oh.
like a respiratory infection.
Oh
There's
gosh.
a couple things. There's a couple things going on,
Wow.
and just as new parents, a couple month old here. It's winter, and we're in the big Womack, which is the big Army hospital here at Fort Bragg. She's up in the intensive care unit there for the kids,
Okay.
for the for the littles, and they were trying to stick her so they can give her some fluids because she was very dehydrated,
Mm.
and they couldn't get to a vein because she was so dehydrated and she was so
Oh.
little. And I just, you know, I, it's a moment that I never forgot, that mom made me make the decision because she was pretty upset about it. But they ended up asking for permission if they could run an IV, but it was basically in her forehead up here. You have to
Oh
imagine this is a
gosh.
very small child.
Yeah.
Her head you could fit, and that
Wow.
was one of the first like real um, kind of tough decisions
Yeah.
that I had to make as a parent. And I don't want to oversell it, because
Mm.
there are a lot of parents that have to make very, very, very life or death situations
Hmm.
for their kid. That's much more serious than what we did. But yeah, making
Still.
the call, like, yeah, yeah, doc, you can stick a needle in her head.
Yeah, that's
That
rough.
was probably the first one. So
Wow.
once they established the line and were able to give her all the respiratory treatments she needed, a couple days later, she recovered pretty quickly, and we were eventually able to go home. So that was
Good.
kind of our first reality check
Yeah.
as new parents, right?
Gosh. Yeah.
So kid number one.
Yeah. Wow.
So did that about 6 or 7 months later. It's time for my next deployment.
Mm.
So I'm in a special operations unit, which is different than I had been before when I'd been in a big, 82nd, right? So a big
Hmm.
brigade's going overseas. So you've got thousands of people that are
Yeah.
all piling onto trains and getting all their stuff going and flying over. This was much different than that. It was me and a couple other guys who were going to a small country that most people had never heard of,
Okay.
and we were going to be gone for a little bit less time than one of those really big deployments.
Gotcha.
But again, this is going to be the first time that I've left my wife since we've been married. I mean,
Yeah.
we were engaged for one of uh one of my deployments, or at least part of it.
Okay.
And this time we've got a less than 1 year old in the
Oh
house.
gosh. Yeah.
So emotionally preparing ourselves for being separated for a little less than a year under those circumstances. And
Yeah.
thank God we live in a time where there's so much technology that we can communicate with each other, right?
Yeah. For reals.
So I still, this was in 2011, 2011. So still, internet's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I had one of those. Do you remember? It used to be called, I think it was the Magic Jack, which was like a USB thing that you could plug into your computer, and then I don't understand how all the technology
Mhm.
works. There's probably some geeks that are yelling at their screens right now, but
Yeah.
you plug this USB into your laptop computer, and
Yeah.
you're able to talk as if you were on the phone. So it was not a video component,
Okay. I think.
but you were assigned like a phone number, and
Gotcha.
it was, anyway. So I was able to
Okay.
make phone calls pretty
Nice.
frequently.
Nice.
So that ended up being about a 9 month deployment.
Mm.
I missed her first birthday, so
Oh gosh.
dad guilt coming in here. So I missed the first birthday of my first kid,
Mm.
in addition to, of course, my wife's birthday.
Yeah.
And then we decide that we're going to come home right around the time that's going to be on my anniversary. And I was, so this is the army, right? So it looks like we're going to get lucky and I'm going to make it home on my anniversary.
Okay.
So it's like, yes.
Hmm.
And then we get to the last place that we're going to be at before we make the final flight home. And then, the command decides, hey, we're going to stick around for another day or so to do a bunch of silly nonsense that doesn't
Oh my gosh.
matter hill of beans to anybody, but go lift some weights and kill some time, and you'll be all
Oh.
right. And so I end up missing that anniversary too. So
Oh.
it's
That
it's
sucks.
kind of that expectation management, right?
Yeah.
So, but we we get home, we're reunited, and it's me and my two girls, right?
Mhm.
And um, really everything's great. The child, her name's Morgan. She is very, very, very happy to see daddy. She's at this point, I guess she would have been almost a year and a half. Yeah, almost a year and a half old at this point. So we get home, and Mama decides that she's almost ready for number two. So we go buy a new house. We sell that house and
Mhm.
buy a new one. It's in the same town, just down the road,
Sure. Yeah.
because we're ready to expand.
Okay.
And that ends up being, we want to have a second child, and so we're in the talks of like, okay, when are we going to start doing this? And then Christmas morning, I open a present that's a pregnancy test, and it's like, oh, okay, this is happening a little sooner than I anticipated. I mean, so
Yeah.
was she
Yeah.
planned? Absolutely, she was planned,
Sure.
just slightly sooner than
Uh,
Dad was expecting.
yep. Yep.
um so that's our second, and
Nice.
another baby girl.
Yeah.
So she is born. She was a September birthday, which
Mm.
another parenting thing. She's born on September 4th, which is, for anybody who knows with elementary school age kids, if you were born on the left or the right of September 1st, is going to have a really band as far as their cohort, right, that they
Mhm.
come up with. So
Yeah.
she's just on the right side of that. So she's the oldest kid in her class for
Oh
the rest
gosh.
of her life.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. That works.
Which works
Yeah.
out because
Yeah.
she's petite, so it
Okay.
kind of works anyway.
It kind of works in her favor. Okay.
So we have our second kid, and I will say, user experiences vary, right? But
Hmm.
my experience as being a soldier, and again, I told you I was in a kind of a small special operations unit.
Hmm.
My command and my leadership and so many of my peers were always so supportive of families.
That's
So do you work long hours and have to do stuff that's not so much fun every now and then, that takes away from family time and all that? Yes, that does happen, but I was fortunate enough to, for the most part, be in units where it was, we're going to train hard, we're going to do what we need to do, and then we're going to go home, and we're not going to just waste time just because of some misguided thoughts on, well, we got to be here really long, just because somebody down the line said so. So very supportive. I had the kind of command where the battalion commander would come to your house at a time of your choosing, and
mhm.
bring baby gifts, and him and his wife would come over and bring chocolate and flowers for mama, and that kind of stuff. So
That's awesome. That's super cool.
yeah,
That's
you're not gonna hear that from all your military people. Some of them
yeah.
will probably have very unfortunate stories,
Mm,
where childbirths were missed because of really silly nonsense.
mm, dang.
Um, so
Yeah.
second child. So fast forward about 7 or 8 months. It's summertime, and I'm at a point in my career where it's time for us to move to Kansas to go do some, we'll call it mandatory school.
Okay.
It's called ILE. I won't bore you with all of it, but
Okay.
it's time to make our first move as a family. Again, earlier I mentioned we did a very local move. I'm not counting
Mm,
that.
gotcha.
Um, so we moved to Eastern Kansas,
Okay.
to Fort Leavenworth, to do a year worth of schooling, and so we have our two little girls. One who is not quite 1 years old at this point. She's almost one. So two little girls. We go out to Kansas, and this is our first big move as a family, right?
Yeah.
So everything that comes along with that.
Mm,
At this point, our two kids are too young to really have to deal with getting pulled out of school and all the woe and drama that comes along with that.
yeah.
That's in the future. We'll
Gotcha.
get there.
Okay.
Um, so mostly just preschool kind of stuff, which
Yeah.
is, it's kind of easy to pull kids out of preschool and change,
Yeah.
shift them around.
Yeah.
So we're in Kansas for a year, and during that year, we get pregnant with number three.
Mm,
So gender to be determined at this point. So a
gotcha.
year later, we move to your neck of the woods.
Mm,
We get our orders to go to Fort Lewis, Washington.
okay.
um,
Yeah.
which, by the way, highly recommend if anybody ever gets a chance to go to the Northwest. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And so we do another cross country move this time from Kansas to Washington, passing through your old haunts there in
Oh, in
Wyoming.
Wyoming. Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so make that long drive.
Mhm.
Couple cars,
Mhm.
couple kids. It wasn't quite like the Oregon Trail.
Nah, yeah.
I'd be exaggerating if I said I was it was, but
Yeah.
nobody died of cholera along the
Okay.
way.
Good.
But
Good.
yeah, good. So we end up in Washington. So Fort Lewis is it's near Tacoma for those who don't know.
Okay.
So probably about 45 minutes or so south of Seattle, not too far.
Gotcha. Okay.
And about 2 months into our living situation there is when we're pregnant, and she's far enough along for us to go guess the I say guess, go get find out the gender of the third child. You want to wager a guess on this one?
Probably another girl.
Absolutely
Oh
another
man.
girl.
Yeah.
So and here's the thing about that, I will say, and there's all kinds of other jokes too about military guys who have all boys versus all girls. So
Mhm.
there's a whole thing about that.
Okay.
um, my wife and I's perspective on you know just children in general, but particularly when pregnant with babies. um, what matters most is obviously you want them to be healthy.
Hmm.
The gender is completely irrelevant because, I mean, we always prayed on this
Hmm.
that we're all fearfully and wonderfully made in our mother's wombs,
Yeah.
and God doesn't make mistakes.
Nope.
So if God wants us to have three girls, then we're
Hmm.
gonna have three girls, and it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, to jumping ahead a little bit, it has been awesome.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of internet videos out there, and who knows how genuine they are. But you see all the gender reveal stuff, and I imagine it's social media, right? So much of
Hmm.
that is probably not even frankly real. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so many of these fathers, when they find out they're having girls, just you why would you make a video or a film like that your kid's probably going to end up seeing when they're older anyway?
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
Yeah. I've seen some that are like, yeah, just over the top. And there was one a couple years ago. That's one of the biggest wildfires in California
the wildfires,
was
yeah, it's a
started
thing.
by, and for us over on the West Coast, like all summer long, we're sucking smoke all summer. It's so annoying. And then to have a gender reveal rip off a fire that, is millions of dollars to fix. It's like, come on, just, do we really have to go there? Like,
Well, there's the direct damage that's caused by that, and then all the indirect too, because
mm,
now insurance premiums go
mm,
up, and now people get priced out of the market because all because of nonsense. Yeah.
yep, yep, yeah, but
So
uh,
so pregnant
no,
with baby number three,
yeah, dang,
another little girl.
okay,
So far we have Morgan. I didn't name my second
mm,
child. Her name is Annalise,
okay,
or just Anna for short. And
yeah,
then now we have Miss Jocelyn, or
okay, Miss
Joss.
Jocelyn, okay,
So Miss Jocelyn is our we call her our hippie baby because she
okay,
was born in Olympia, Washington, unlike the other two who were
gotcha,
born in army hospitals in North Carolina. So
gotcha, right on. That's funny.
she's groovy. She's got
Nice,
curly hair and she's groovy.
nice. That's awesome.
Um, so we have our third little girl, and again, just fast forward a little bit so we can move this thing along.
Mm,
We The army decides that the unit that I'm in command of out there at Washington,
mm,
the unit's gonna go away. It's there's some cutbacks and we're moving stuff around, and so we end up closing the unit down, and all the leaders from the unit that I was in basically all got sent to Korea because it was
gotcha.
a, hey, Korea's the new hotness. This is 2016.
Okay,
So just kind of putting you in that space. This is kind of the lead up to the 2016 elections when this is all happening and
okay,
things are heating up. The big Obama's big pivot to Asia, if you remember all that. So we're
yeah, okay,
yeah, well, some of it
mm,
was talk and some of it was real. But
gotcha.
anyway,
Okay,
a lot of the guys from my unit just got sent to Korea because that was the hotness.
dang.
So that was a choice. It was, we can send you for 1 year without your family, or we could send you for 2 years with your family. However, you're going to be up in the northern area that's going to be near the DMZ. So even your family's going to be there, but they're actually not. They're going to have to go live all the way down in the Seoul area. And
Oh,
if you're lucky, you'll see them on weekends.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
we were faced with that choice, which
yeah.
was, we can either just do a turn and burn for a year,
Mhm.
or we can do 2 years of this kind of weird back and forth. Then so we chose the former
Mm,
option. So
yeah,
I moved them back here to the Fayetteville, North Carolina area to live near family,
gotcha.
and then I hopped on a plane and went to Korea for a year. And
Dang.
that's a whole other time. So Trump wins the election.
Yeah.
The South Korean president gets impeached and is removed from office. So there's all kinds of geopolitical stuff going on. This is
Yeah.
also when the Little Rocket Man, me and my big button, all that was going on.
Yeah.
So
Oh
it was kind of
gosh.
a high stress time. I'm not gonna lie, but
Yeah.
um, but when I came home on leave
Mm,
during near the halfway point on that, and uh, I won't get too much into the details. But when I came home on leave, my wife had been off the pill, and
mm,
so she ended up getting pregnant, and this would have been our first and only unplanned pregnancy.
yeah. Okay.
So I didn't know this until much later,
Yeah.
but so come home for a week or so, get back on a plane, fly back to Korea. A couple months later, I get the middle of the night phone call when she says I'm pregnant, and that I got to finally experience what so many men get, and that's the phone call.
Oh dang.
so
Dang. Okay.
um so we're both completely shocked by this, and we're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, this is how it's got to be. It's God's plan, and we were due for one of these, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can hear my other three little girls squealing in the background because they're all more or less, my two older ones are mostly aware of what's going on. My third one's just going along for the ride
Nice.
because she's really still mostly a baby at this point.
Okay.
But um, so a couple months go by, and I get that phone call, and she and I say, "Well, I'm not going to be home for another few more months." I don't quite remember the exact timeline on this,
Yeah.
but for baby number four, I'll be home for the birth. It'll be a little bit close, but we'll be good on that.
Yeah.
And so we start kind of planning like what this is going to look like, and then uh, kind of a long story short, she had kind of a later than usual, but my wife miscarried, which was
Oh.
a very
Yeah.
emotional. Yeah, it was a very
Yeah.
emotional
I'm sorry.
event for all concerned.
Mm,
But I gotta tell you, man, that hits the mommies the hardest.
yeah.
There's no
Gosh.
question, no question. So
Dang.
it was very, as a dad and as a husband, it was very helpless position to be in when your wife is going through one of the roughest times of her entire life, and you're not there to be there
Yeah.
for her.
Oh my gosh. That would be
I mean, yeah, how
horrible.
hollow it sounds to talk on the phone about
Mm,
this. I
yeah.
mean, like, what can you really do?
Yeah.
So that was a big challenge dealing with that from the other side of the world.
Yeah. Gosh. I could not. I would not wish that on anybody. That would be.
Yeah.
That'd be rough.
So she has to deal with that.
Mhm.
She has her family here, and my family. So they're able to kind of help comfort her through that. And then few months later, I redeploy, come back,
Mhm.
and then we kind of pick up where we left off. Because
Yeah.
what else can you do, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you it's kind of a sad way to come home, but
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
we have our three girls, and we've had this tragedy that we're dealing with.
Mhm.
It's in as healthy a way as possible,
Mhm.
and getting back involved with our church family and doing all that, which my wife was always so good about making sure the kids were staying in church and doing all those things while I was gone.
Yeah. That's good.
But we bring up a subject that we had talked about for years prior to that, and that was adoption.
Okay.
And she had always, since she was a little girl, she had always wanted to adopt. It was always something that God had put on her heart. And we talked about it for a year. I mean, like even when we were newlyweds, it was something that we talked about. And I was open to it. I was always open to it.
Yeah.
After my deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, and seeing the, some the mayhem and the carnage, and just so much displacement, particularly with the women and children,
Yeah.
particularly, even with orphans,
Yeah.
to be precise.
Yeah.
Um, that was all kind of in the back of my mind and on my heart. And then the deployment I was talking about earlier, where my firstborn was her first birthday, I
Hmm.
was in Sri Lanka, and for those that don't know, Sri Lanka fought a 30-year civil war that was very brutal, and it was awful, and it ended
Wow.
in 2009.
Oh gosh.
So
Wow.
so I was there right after it ended in a small team with a very specific mission that was there. I won't really get into it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I won't really get into it, but um, a lot of orphans.
Mm.
I'll just say that.
Dang.
And we were going around seeing these basically they were camps is what they were, where the losers of the civil war were being placed in these camps while things
Wow.
were being rebuilt and
Wow.
whatever. And you just see these children who had nothing to do with any of this carnage or mayhem, and they're just victims basically.
Hmm.
And so it was during that time when God really laid it on my heart to do something about this. And so as soon as I get home from Korea, so this is in 2017, that's when, so we've got all that kind of history behind it. And then
Yeah.
with the um, decision, with the, not decision, excuse me, with the miscarriage is what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we decided we're going to go ahead and do this.
Cool.
And we know, so, we pray real hard on it, and we decide this is the thing we're going to do. We know it's going to take a long time, which it does. And we
Yeah.
also know, there's considerable costs involved, and the answer is always it depends, but we know it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
So we pray real hard on it, and decide that, is this the thing we're going to do? What do you think? And she looks me in the eye and says, yes, we want to do it. And I'll never forget it too. I looked her in the eye and said, there's no half measures on this.
Mm.
If we're going to choose to do this
Yeah.
for all the right reasons, we're trying to serve widows and orphans. We're trying to do right by these poor kids who've
Mm.
been orphaned. We're trying to please God as He would want us to.
Hmm.
There's no turning back. We're not going to get into this and then get cold feet. So we
Yeah.
we have the adult talk, and
Okay.
then that's what we decide we're going to do.
Yeah.
So now's the decision to. I'm sorry, we're going to ask something.
Nope. Nope. You're good.
I'm doing a lot of talking here.
You're
Sorry,
fine. No,
man.
it's good. It's good.
I, I was an officer. We talk too much usually. So
No, you're all good. I'm enjoying it. No, this is great.
now the next question is, from where are we going to do this? And so usually it's two big categories. There's domestic or international.
Okay.
We're open to both, but based off of my overseas experiences, we decided we wanted to prioritize doing an international
Sure.
adoption. So
Yeah.
so from where? There's obviously a tremendous amount. There's supply and demand, right? There's
Hmm.
far more supply than there is demand, unfortunately, for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
We wanted to prioritize countries that have a bad track record for, what is say, human trafficking,
Okay.
particularly sex trafficking.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a lot of those too. So that's not really winnowing the field, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately.
But um, Asia was, again, a very large area, was kind of my specialty
Okay.
while I was in the army. So it was like, okay, well, I have a lot of experience coming in and out of Asia, all over the place, and
Mm.
my language that I had learned through the army was Tagalog. Now they just call it Filipino, which is
Okay.
much more. which is much more clear for everybody to understand. So
Okay.
Filipino.
Gotcha.
Um, Again, a large, diverse country with many languages, but they picked one and called it Filipino because that's
Gotcha.
what they speak in Manila.
Okay.
So we chose that country because of the my ability to speak at a elementary age here. I don't want to overstate
Sure.
my training and capabilities. I'm
Sure.
actually
Sure.
not Jason Bourne. I don't care what everybody thinks. Yeah,
Okay.
so um,
Yeah.
yeah, I speak at the first grade level. So
Nice. Nice. Okay.
we chose the Philippines. Um, Based off all those criteria I just mentioned. Another real important one was that the requirements that the host nation country, in this case the Philippines, had for uh, prospective or respective rather adoptive parents
Mm.
was to come to the country for less than 10 weeks. I think it ended up, well, for us, it ended up being over 10 days because we ended up being there during COVID and there was,
Oh.
yeah, there was some quarantine and some nonsense. But
Yep.
again, at the time
Hmm.
when we were figuring this out, it was a, hey, just come here for 3 or 4 days, do some paperwork, do some administrative stuff, and then you can fly home and you're scot free.
Gotcha.
Because
Okay.
some of the other countries were, we actually looked at Sri Lanka first because I was
Okay.
like, well, I've got experience there, and I know a lot of people, and the process there was, hey, you got to come here, and you basically have to live here for undetermined amount of time, and then if you're lucky, maybe at the end of that they'll approve you, and you can leave with your child. And I was like, I've got a security clearance and a job. I can't just like
Yeah.
move, and plus and three other kids, right? So
Yeah.
like
Oh my
we're not
gosh.
going to just go live in South Asia for an undetermined amount of time, and maybe a
Yeah.
bureaucrat
No.
somewhere won't.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, so countries are like that. Like Russia is particularly bad because Putin is a giant man child, and if he gets mad at the United States, he will literally just turn the spigots off. Just be like, you know
Really?
what, so who suffers, right? These
Yeah.
families and these children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, that sucks.
we decide
Mhm.
Philippines. So we put our heart and our energy into that. We have to do home studies, and people are probably vaguely familiar with the process. I mean, if you're doing an international adoption, it generally has to be done through a Hague approved adoption agency.
Okay.
I won't bore everybody. If you can do a whole podcast on just on the
Yeah.
adoption stuff,
Oh
which we're
gosh.
not going to go through now, but
Sure.
there's a high bar for these things, and there
Okay.
should be,
Yeah.
because again, they're protecting children from being trafficked and all that stuff.
Yeah. That
So
makes sense.
it's important.
Yeah.
So we work through a really amazing uh, nonprofit organization called Both Hands, which
Okay.
is it's from the Gospel of Luke. I
Okay.
can't remember off the top of my head, so please forgive me. But
Good.
there's a passage in there that's talking about, with one hand you're helping the widow, and with the other hand you're helping the orphans.
Okay. Yeah.
And what you end up doing is this: you do a service project in
Oh.
order to raise money for your adoption. You find an widow and you do a service project to serve them. So it's usually something
Okay.
like house improvement kind of stuff. We're not talking.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it could be as in depth as you want. We're not talking about having like the entire house rebuild. It's not on the level of Habitat
Sh-
for Humanity. It's more
Gotcha.
like sprucing things up, cleaning things up. If there's damage, getting the debris out of the way and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
So that's cool that
so
that they
so
have you help. And
yeah, and it
yeah.
really really amazing organization. So
Yeah.
Both Hands, if anybody wants to look them up,
Yeah.
they're doing the Lord's work literally. So,
Awesome.
and how it works is people donate to the nonprofit to help your particular service project.
Okay.
And because it's a 501(c)(3), there's a legality that's involved there. And so what they
Sure.
have to do is they have to vet all of this stuff, and then once it's all, and then they take that money that's been donated, and then they reimburse you for for specific adoption costs that you've already paid for.
Gotcha.
So it's,
Okay.
hey, we had to pay a home study fee that was $1,400, and they say okay,
Gotcha.
and then they reimburse you for that.
That's cool.
So it's all totally on the up and up.
Yeah.
But so we raise money. We are ready to go kind of in the final stages of our adoption. But again, it's the military, and several years have gone by, and it's my time to move again.
Oh gosh.
So we move in the summer of 2020, which for those of you who want to remember what was going on in May June timeframe of 2020.
Yeah.
The good news is I had the ability to kind of shape where we were moving. So I had no control over whether I was moving or not, but I could at
Mm,
least have a little bit of control over where I was going to go.
gotcha. Okay.
And so God was looking out for us because we were able to. So we were in North Carolina. We were able to move to Virginia instead of, you know, overseas or the other side of the country or Hawaii or whatever, because
Mhm.
the adoption agency that we had been using that was accredited for, you know, within the confines of the state of North Carolina could not did not have jurisdiction in Virginia, which is where we were going to go. However, they had a sister agency that did, and so they
Oh
were able
wow.
to just kind of hand things off to them and
Okay.
do you know, a handshake. And we ended up having to do an additional home study, which again,
Mm,
for those who've gone through the process, it's tedious and takes a very long time. However, there was some pretty big stuff that we were able to kind of bring forward from the previous process.
that's nice. That's good.
And so yeah, so we get to Virginia. We're in the Chester area, which is not far from Richmond,
Mm,
and we've basically been put on to this one little boy. Our previous agency said, "Hey, there's a child that was identified and was basically matched with another family, and they were kind of fast tracking him. And then the family had to back out for an undisclosed reason.
huh.
We don't know.
Hmm.
So this little boy was he was kind of like getting teed up and ready to go, and you know, he's ready. Are you interested? And we said, yes.
Wow.
Why, absolutely, yes.
Wow.
So our church family helped us put together, they put a short list of things. They were like, hey, we need you to put together like really almost like a promo video, like put together
Oh wow.
a 2 minute promo video saying, hey, we, you know, we're the perfect family for you, come on over. I mean, it was a little bit cheesy, but
Hey,
um at
it
the
works.
time it's kind of funny now because of all the social media stuff I have to do now. But at the
Mm,
time I had zero skills in any of this stuff. So, you know, we asked the
yeah.
intern at church,
Yeah.
like, hey
Yeah.
man, on your free time, which you probably don't have much of, would you help us put this adoption video together? And of course he said yes, because he was a
Nice.
solid American.
Awesome.
Well, we ended up getting approved
Yeah.
for the child, and so we have a name, we have a child. We are starting to do Skype calls with them,
Mm.
all the things, and then COVID hits.
Oh
So
gosh.
we're already 2.5 years into a really long process, and then
Wow.
everything starts slowing down
Slowing
even
down.
more.
Oh my gosh.
And then we move. So I remember that our church family, the pastor called. This was probably the week before we moved to leave for Virginia, and said, "Is there anything we can pray for you?" And of course we said, "Well, yeah, I mean, yes, anything involving the move."
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got 3 kids plus, you know, and then, you know, at this point we're counting, his name's Derek.
There,
We are
okay.
counting Derek.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, we have 4 kids and one of them's on the other side of the world. We got to figure out how to bring him home.
Bring him home. Wow. Okay.
And so we move and we get planted in Virginia. And I mean, like 2 or 3 months after we get there, we get the phone call. It's like, all right, you're cleared. You've got to, you've, you have to go through a whole bunch of hoops on the other side as far as quarantines and this, that, the other, but you're
Yeah.
clear, you can go get them. And so we
Nice.
finally got the green light. And there's a whole other podcast we could do about the adventure that was
Yeah.
navigating all of this. And I'll
Gosh.
keep it short-ish.
Okay.
So we fly to Manila, and here's another thing: if your marriage can survive the two of you being in a hotel room for 10 days,
Oh my
having
gosh.
your food brought to you,
Wow.
if you can survive that, you can survive anything.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That would be
Um,
that would be a test for sure. For anybody. Not I'm not saying that about me and my wife, but that would
yeah.
definitely I think
Yeah.
it'd be a
Yeah.
test for anybody to go through that.
I mean, we've got a great marriage, but
Hmm.
you know, you can only do so much. You can only watch so many movies before you start looking at each other
Yeah.
like, do something. I don't
Do
know,
something.
just do something.
Entertain
Uh,
me. Yeah.
Entertain me.
Yeah.
It does feel like prison in some. I did a lot of push-ups.
Oh gosh.
A lot of
Okay.
push-ups.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah. So we get placed with our child, and mom will never forgive me because she and we have the face masks on, and then the big plastic one that
Mhm.
covers over the front because the Philippines went way overboard with this stuff.
Yeah.
So we have all this on, and we're brought down to the quarantine period's over, so we can at least come outside now. And
Mhm.
we're down there at the entrance to the big hotel, and the van pulls up, and they open the door. And again, we've been skyping with this little guy for months and months and months at this point, so he at least
Yeah.
recognizes us. He's
Yeah.
4,
Okay.
and the van door opens, and he bolts out of that thing and runs right past mom and right into dad's arms. And to this day, she has never forgiven me for this.
Oh man.
So
Well, eh, oh
so
man,
parenting,
that
right?
yeah, yeah.
So we our 3 girls are back in North Carolina staying. They're getting passed around the family, right? They're
Mhm.
with my mom, then they're with my wife's mom, then they're with aunts and uncles, and then I don't know, probably the guy downtown. I'm joking.
Yeah. No.
So we bring him home. He immediately, just gloms on to us, which again, that's another thing that you're very concerned about is, how is the attachment's the term, but how
Okay.
how is the attachment going to be with this child? You have absolutely no idea. And
Yeah.
we certainly had our moments of, little guys, he's got a temper.
Mm.
And a lot of these children do, just because they weren't necessarily, because they weren't mothered properly during some of their formative years, they don't necessarily have some of the coping skills to deal with things. And
Gotcha. Okay.
otherwise,
Interesting.
so I'm certainly not an expert on these things, but
Yeah.
so we bring him home.
Yeah.
He's being introduced to his siblings for the first time, and so he's the youngest.
Yeah.
uh, my kids are all close to being 2 years apart, so 2
Okay.
years, 2 years, 2 years, and then him and my youngest daughter are 11 months apart.
Oh wow.
So again, just enough age to, I'd say, fight like cats and dogs. I don't know if that quite does it justice, because cats and dogs, from what I've seen, actually get along pretty well. It's
Yeah.
more like cobra and
Oh
mongoose, I think,
gosh.
would be a better. Yeah,
Wow.
or maybe a honey badger and a wolverine or
Oh
something.
gosh. Dang.
So once our family is finally united, this is our new reality. So we have
Mm.
4 kids,
Wow.
relatively close in age, and then the fourth one barely speaks any. His birth mother was deaf mute,
Oh
so he
wow.
has some level of congenital hearing issues, but we just don't know how bad it is.
Okay.
Um, so he doesn't really speak Filipino. He doesn't really speak English. He kind of speaks his own something, and really, to
Interesting.
this day, that's still kind of in a lot of ways true. Kind of
Interesting.
speaks his own little language.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so so parenting four kids, all pretty close, and with all those challenges, it's it's been the most rewarding and frustrating, at times, moments of my adult life, to be sure.
Yeah.
It's it's challenging when you have a lot of, we all have our own issues and baggage that we bring with the into parenthood as adults, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's stuff we bring from childhood. um I definitely have some, I hate talking about it, not because it's not important, but sometimes it gets over top. But I definitely, from some of my overseas adventures, and it's a huge challenge to be able to parent properly, or to the best of your ability,
Hmm.
with with all of that going on, and everybody has their own unique challenges. So
Yeah.
being being in a place where you're placing your priorities where they belong, which is always supposed to be
Hmm.
God, spouse, kids, and then community. You can extrapolate out from there, right?
Yeah.
So um that can be very hard, particularly when you are struggling with your own issues, right? Which
Hmm.
is That's the sanctification process. At least it has been for me.
Yeah.
um it's serving others, which, in another way is very helpful in taking that focus off of my own self and my own needs,
Okay.
which, although I do it quite imperfectly, I think that's how Jesus would have wanted it anyway,
Yeah.
because if we're not putting our emphasis on ourselves, then by definition we're serving others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes I have to tell myself, when it's about the dozen or so times I have to tell my kids to stop fighting, I always have to stop myself and say, you know, this is happening for a reason. And yes, kids can be kind of cloying and obnoxious sometimes about these things, but
Yeah.
there's probably a reason why it's going on. And most importantly, I can't necessarily control how that situation is going down, but I can control how I react to it.
Yeah. No.
And I don't always do a great job.
Yeah.
Um, we'll say 50-50, right?
Sure. Yep. No, I
I don't know.
I totally get that one. It's I've definitely had my share of overreactions, and in hindsight, it's like, yeah, you didn't need to react like that. That's you were being more childish than the kids were being childish in that moment, and yeah.
Well, exactly. And, you know, the, the 5-year-old kind of has a free pass to act like a 5-year-old.
Hmm.
Do I? The answer is
The
no.
answer is no, but sometimes, darn it, I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely not perfect in this aspect. I have to go before God. Man, I try to do it every night. If I don't, I will absolutely do it in the morning, or sometimes both, frankly. But it's it's the humility of first being able to go to God and ask for, if this situation warrants it, ask for forgiveness for the poor way in which I handled that situation where the kid was just asking for a snack. Yes, it was the 20th time they asked for a snack, and it was while I was cooking dinner,
Hmm.
but I didn't really need to raise my voice the way that I did,
Hmm.
because the kid doesn't know all the stuff you've got going on at work, and then maybe you and mom had a fight, and maybe your dad has not been feeling well, and the kids don't care about all that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they do, in the sense that they don't want Nana to be sick, but
Hmm.
it's I didn't need to raise my voice that way, and so going to God and having the humility first to go to Him and ask for forgiveness and ask for wisdom and guidance, and then oftentimes, not every time, oftentimes being able to go to your child,
Hmm.
and that can, for me, that's actually been harder to go to my child in some circumstances and apologize and say, look, dad did not handle that situation well. This is how I should have handled things, and you deserve better than that. And I was not doing what Jesus would have wanted in this situation. And yes, you were also not doing the right thing either. However, it is my job to handle the situation much better than I did. That is more difficult for me than it is to go to God, because at this point I'm much more comfortable in my walk.
Yep.
Uh,
No, I think
have you
that's
experienced
huge.
anything like that?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Excuse me. Yeah, I think having to go to your kids and um, ask their forgiveness. I completely agree. Is sometimes way harder than. I mean, it I don't say it's easy to pray because you can just go, go sit in your room, go sit in a chair, close your eyes. God forgive me for that. But when you have like this human being in front of you, that it definitely it makes it a lot harder. I was thinking of one of like the kind of the emotional things that I struggle with sometimes, is and I've started to be better, and my interactions with my kids have I'm I think I'm getting there where I'm doing more right than I'm doing more wrong, and that's the direction that I want to go. But by no means am I perfect with it. But um, it's like there's this tension because, like, when my kids are little, I would get upset and I would like blow up, and raise my voice, and then I'd have this like clarity of realization, like, oh my gosh, there's this like monster that's like getting mad at my children. I need to go protect my kids. And then the emotional like struggle of like I, I'm that monster, like that's trying to protect him is also the one scaring him. And like how do you mentally deal with that? And like how do you like you can't blow up at your kids and then immediately go to them and try to give them a hug because you were just scaring them 2 seconds ago. And it's like, so I think
Yeah.
that's one of been one of my struggles when I sit back and think about like all right, you need to be the big boy and put on your big boy panties and quit screwing up and like
Yeah.
be the adult in the situation. Um, so I don't know. I guess that's how my brain thinks about about things
Yeah.
sometimes. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
um,
it's that my teenager hates it when I
mm,
say this, but if she's acting like a teenager, I'll ask her and say, "Hey, that thing you just said, or those feelings, or the whatever the situation dictates,
mhm,
and I'll ask her. I'll like ask herself, are those fruits of the spirit?" And
mhm,
of course, I'll get the like, oh, man, like dad's totally right in this situation, but I can't. I'm not going to admit it, so I'm going to tap dance my way out of this situation.
yep,
And then fast forward a couple hours later, I will be in a situation and I will be angry about the fact that I've asked this mess to get cleaned up 5 times and you're over there asking me for screen time
mhm,
and you haven't done your homework and I ended up raising my voice at you over this whole thing. That's when you get that conviction moment where you're like, well, was my reaction fruits of the spirit?
yep,
The answer is
no,
no, it is not.
yep,
So that's that humility piece, right?
mhm,
So um every family is going to be different, but it's how do you balance. Let me put it this way.
mhm,
There's a saying, and particularly, I'll say the Army. I imagine the Marine Corps is probably pretty similar too.
okay,
The saying is familiarity breeds contempt.
okay,
And what that means is when you're in charge, whether you're a commanding officer or a senior ranking non commissioned officer, because this can be NCOs too, you don't ever want to be too close. And there's different schools of thought on this, but you don't ever want to be too close, like buddy buddy,
yeah,
with your subordinates because oftentimes that will degrade their opinion of you and your positional power. They may love having a buddy buddy, but then
mhm,
when you got to put your big boy pants back on and make big boy and girl decisions,
mhm,
um, when you were just the guy that was in there playing video games with them, it's a lot harder for them to put all the little cubbies back in the cubby holes, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
so back to parenting, how do we want to have godly homes, godly marriages where we are modeling a God and Christ like relationship,
mhm,
that's why I think, the genders, right? I think the masculine and the feminine, one is not more important than the other. They complement each other. And
absolutely,
I think Genesis is pretty clear when it's saying that, that the masculine and feminine traits, the positive traits of that are showing a more complete, not totally, but a more complete picture of the nature of God, right? And so
yeah,
we're
yeah,
attempting to model that for our children, but how do we do that, particularly as fathers, when when it's kind of our role to be the leader of the home in a biblical household?
yeah,
We are the leaders of the home, and it is our job to teach rules and enforce standards and do all this while simultaneously doing it as lovingly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That is a small needle that you got to thread, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
can't do it on our own, right? That
Yep.
which is the point, which come we keep coming back to this, that
Yeah.
that's where we, subject ourselves to the will of God, because we can't do this on our own. And so that's where, our friend Uncle Jesus comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is
Yeah.
any of this making any
No,
sense?
yeah, it does. No, it's awesome. I appreciate that. I think maybe you've kind of touched on it, but I'll ask on this. So, do you
Yeah.
feel your experience in the military has I, I think saying like I don't want to say like altered the way that you parent, or and I would assume that it affects the way that you parent. Um, but I guess how or maybe like maybe from this perspective of like talking to other military dads, let's say, like what kind of thoughts or pieces may you have experience with being able to kind of maybe peel back the curtain a little bit, um, and say, hey, I don't know, like some advice or just thoughts.
Okay.
Does that make? I don't feel like I'm articulating that question very well. Um, and
Well, I
I
got a couple
apologize.
things. Maybe I
Okay.
can run with it, and we'll
Okay.
see if this
Sure.
scratches the
Yeah.
itch here. So
Yeah.
myself and then my best friend,
Mm-hmm.
Dan,
Okay.
who I co-host our show with.
Mm-hmm.
We're both Army brats.
Okay.
So we're both Army brats. We've grown up in Army towns our entire lives, and we're both career Army guys ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I retired a couple years more. Well, I just retired. He retired a couple years ago.
Okay.
It's all we've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of funny. Again, that's another recurring theme we have on our show, is how many military families are multi-generational military families,
Okay.
and the recruiting numbers bear this out. I mean,
Mm.
the majority of people that are entering the military, not all, the majority of them are people who are family members of former military themselves. Doesn't necessarily have to be parents,
Mm-hmm.
but people who've had some level of influence in their life by somebody who's served in the military.
Yeah.
Not necessarily careers again, but
Mm-hmm.
so back to the parenting thing. It's all I've ever known. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
I literally went from birth until a month ago.
Yeah.
And because I'm retired, I still have an ID card, so
Yeah.
I'm still not. It's like The Godfather, right? Like, you never really, as soon as
No,
you think you're out, they bring you back in.
you back it. Yeah. Dang.
Um, I'll say this also about the military, the Army particularly. We have what we call the warrior ethos.
Mm.
So it's just kind of that fighting spirit, right? And
Okay.
there's a code of ethics and, some morals that are back behind this. And for the most part, what the Army values are that we train guys and basic training on, learning all this stuff, it's all kind of a secularized version of biblical morality, and
Mm-hmm.
that we already know. But again, because you're not supposed to proselytize
Mm-hmm.
in the military,
Yeah.
they basically take all the good stuff out of Christianity, and then,
Mm.
remove God. So,
Okay.
that's another discussion for another
Yeah.
day as
Yeah.
to why we've chosen to do that. But the good most of the good stuff is still there. It's,
Mm-hmm.
leadership is, servant leadership, placing others for yourself, um, all those things. All of those values apply to parenthood. Here's another thing, though, that's very difficult with having a Christian walk while you're in the military, and that's kind of the downside to that ethos is a very, very, I'm choosing my words carefully. There's a heavy stress on individuality, and that sounds kind of like it's oxymoron for the military, but what I
Mm,
mean is it's that resiliency. You hear that word all the time: resiliency, 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 toughness, resiliency, physical courage, moral courage,
okay.
being able to make really tough decisions in highly stressed situations. When you're cold, tired, wet, and hungry, and
Mm,
and all, and we stack all of this on top of our servicemen and women and wanting them to have that toughness, and they come out on the other side of it, and then sometimes we wonder why their faith isn't as good as it probably should been,
gotcha.
because if you're not, if you're, all that is being asked of you and you were not leaning on God throughout, then you're either going to come out a basket case, an alcoholic, or just somebody who's like, well, what do I need God for? I mean, look at me. I've done all this stuff. I've got all the brass on my chest, and I've done all these accomplishments. And um, it doesn't necessarily have to be boastful. I mean,
Mm,
it's not necessarily a me thing, but it's a, what do I need God for when I've been able to handle all this between myself and the people to my left and my right. And
mm-hmm.
I've seen
Yeah,
a lot of that too, where it's some of the strongest Christians I know
yeah.
are people, servicemen and women, and then the opposite is also true. So
Mm,
maybe it's that bell curve, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
um and that has to translate over into parenting. I
Mm,
mean, if you have all that, I mean, it's ego is what it is. I
mm,
can't imagine that makes a good recipe for parenting.
yeah. Interesting. So, and I'll ask this, and I think you answered this. You were, and I'll get the terminology wrong, so please forgive me. Um, an officer or in leadership over people,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
Is it ever? I guess you ever find yourselves like, or trying to like get back into like almost like commanding your children,
I think I know where
like
this is going, and it's
yeah,
it's a great question.
like
Yeah.
do this. I expect you to do this now because I used to tell my guys get this done and it got done, but you're a 6 year old, and
Yeah.
so is
We
there? I
talked
guess
about this in the pregame a little bit,
okay,
and
yeah,
yes, it's absolutely true, and it's a great question.
yeah,
So back to the humility piece. It can be a very humbling experience to be part of a well-oiled machine where you
hmm
are surrounded by quiet professionals
hmm
who have all volunteered multiple times to get to where they are, and they've been assessed and selected and groomed, and they've done all the things, and these are professional men and women, America's best,
hmm
and you have the pleasure and honor of being associated with these individuals, and even if you get to lead them, even better, and you do this and you do it well, and you come home and you ask this 8-year-old to pick up their dirty socks off the floor, and they may as well flip you the bird. I mean, whatever the 8-year-old equivalent of that is,
yep.
and it is a humbling experience to say,
Oh,
I am a leader of men, and you just told me what I could do with myself. So
yeah,
um, that goes back to that sanctification, right?
yeah, absolutely. Dang. Oh,
Because it is a metaphor in a manner because again, you stand there and you fold your arms like this. I can't believe this little turd just did that to me. And but
yep.
then you have to really stop and you have to humble yourself and say, how many times have I done something that I know that I should not have done? And I've come crawling back to God and
hmm
said, sorry for doing that for the 300th time.
Yep.
And he forgives us every single time.
Yeah. Yep.
What did Jesus say? Not seven, but 700.
Yeah, 77 times
Yeah.
7 or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
You checked my math on that, but yes,
it's it,
the point stands.
yep, the point stands. It's
So,
a big number.
um, but yeah, but it's a blast. So
Yeah.
my kids now are 14, 11, and two 8-year-olds, but we're in that little 1 month period between my two
Yeah.
youngest ones. My third one turns 9 in a couple weeks. So
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah.
Right on. Well, I will. I have another question, and we may start to. We'll kind of land the plane. Um,
Okay.
I'll say, what has been your favorite part of kind of, and this may be like four separate questions, or I'll let you kind of choose how you want to answer. But basically, what's been your favorite part with like this stage of life, or like maybe the last year with your kids being um, 14, 11, 8, and 8. So my son's 14. He's a freshman in high school. And that was a whole realization moment of, we have a high schooler now. We're doing this. And my daughter's going to be 13 in January. So now both my kids will be, yeah, teenagers. So now I have two teenagers, and she's in
The
middle
look
school.
on your face of the look on your face of sheer panic. Yes. Yeah.
Of realization of, oh my gosh. But yeah, what's kind of been your favorite part? And I'll kind of let you choose how you want to answer, like this stage of life with the kids, or like kind of the last year ish, and then I'll follow up with the inverse of that, of maybe what's been the challenging. Uh, but yeah, that'll be that question.
Okay. So the phase we're in now, I mean, I enjoy having older kids, and mom beats me up all this time because she loves the. I never understand how women enjoy the smell of babies. It's kind of weird to me, but
Okay.
it's at the primal level. You and I
Yep.
will never understand it.
Nope.
So,
Yep.
um,
I gotcha.
um, I love having older kids who, it sounds kind of silly to put it this way, but who can want to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to go canoeing. I want to go camping. I want to, and yes, because I got three girls, it is what it is. I want to teach them how to, split logs with a, with a maul,
Yeah.
or how to cook stuff in a Dutch oven and do all those things. So we don't get to do it as much. There's never enough time, so we don't get to
Yeah.
do a lot of that stuff as often
Yeah.
as I would like to. But
Mm-hmm.
I love being able to teach them, and I'm a real outdoorsy guy,
Mm-hmm.
kind of by nature. So I love being able to just get them outside, get them away from the screens, get them out doing stuff. And sometimes they'll complain about it at first. That wears off real fast
Yep.
once you can kind of poke through. Um, this is a good age where we're at now, and particularly my two youngest now, is once they're kind of 8, and I mean they're kind of running on all cylinders at that point, as far like their personalities are developed
Yep.
at this point. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
because I used to always think, like, when they're like 3 or 4 years old, like, you can kind of start to see the outer limits of what a personality might be, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but we're there now, and so I love really kind of sitting back a little bit and watching and seeing kind of how the personalities start unfolding.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
It's
Yeah.
the big reveal, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
um
Yeah.
so so this is a great stage for that. And again, I just retired, so
Mm-hmm.
I won't say I have more time on my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, literally the opposite is true. I have less free time on my hands in my second act here,
Yeah.
but I'm not traveling and I'm not gone all the time. I'm able to pick up kids from practice and do all the stuff that I wasn't necessarily able to do in previous years. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been good for the marriage.
Yeah. Totally.
Kind of course, my wife is, up to her ears, and all four of our kids are in a small private school, so they actually
Okay.
all go to school together,
Oh,
even though
nice.
because it's a K through 12.
Okay.
So she's up to her ears and homework,
Mm-hmm.
and did you bring home your folder? Did I sign this? Did I do all this? And while juggling all that, helping with homework, and every kid has their own activities.
Yeah.
But I'm present for that.
That's
So
awesome. That's huge.
this is a great phase.
Yeah.
But you wanted to know about some of the tougher phases, right?
Yeah. What's been, and I guess, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
the opposite of that. What's been kind of the most
Yeah.
challenging in this kind of stage of life?
Oh, in the current stage.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Um,
yeah. Um, so the personalities. I'm gonna commit some serious
Mhm.
microaggressions here. I
Okay.
use that term like ironically because I think it's a dumb term.
Okay.
So, um, they're not microaggressions. They're
Sure.
just we're adults talking here.
Sure.
But
No, yep.
having three same gendered kids that close in age, so whether they be boys or girls, in my case, girls,
Mhm.
it's a it can get aggressive around here
Okay.
sometimes with the girls. So
Yeah.
um sometimes I just have to the old saying, pick and choose your battles, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There are some things that are worth fighting for, and there are some things that are not.
Yes.
And I'm absolutely guilty of not picking the right battles sometimes.
Mhm. Yep.
Again, because as dad, it's my job to make and enforce standards,
Mhm.
not because I'm a malevolent dictator, but because I'm preparing my kids for a life outside these walls. Because their mother inside these walls, her job is to love them and nurture them and really really be that seminal person in their life with their in their moral formation and the building of their humanity. And
Mhm.
women are fantastic at that, and my wife in particular. My job is to be a loving father, yes, but to prepare them for what's going to go on out there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes in the enforcement of standards, sometimes I can be, when I say heavy handed, I just mean, it probably couldn't hurt to something slide from time to time. Try not to be
Yeah.
that stereotypical military dad
Mm.
who's um, probably stricter than he needs to be. So, we kind of talked a little bit earlier about, we bring our own baggage to the table sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
figuring out what we need to leave behind, and
Mm.
what probably can come with us.
Mhm.
We've certainly had some challenges in the last year or so. And
Mhm.
again, with another move,
Mhm.
this I told the kids this was the last move, which I don't know if I can ever really truly make that promise, but
Yeah.
it's the last one Uncle Sam's making us do anyway.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Um, but I figured in my 14-year-old, well, she's almost 14. I think I said she was 14 earlier. She's almost 14. She's still 13. Um, she has, I think she's lived in, I want to say 9 different houses.
Oh, wow.
It makes it sound
Yeah.
like she's a foster kid, right?
That's a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
and not quite as many schools,
Mhm.
but pretty close. And I
Wow.
remember, and of all my kids, she's the one that the moves are always the hardest on her.
Mm. Okay.
Just every personality is different. When I was a kid, I actually loved moving because I got bored easily. So I was like,
Mm.
oh sweet, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
My big sister hated it.
Mm.
I got the same dynamic, and maybe it's the oldest. I don't know, because my oldest hated it, and I just remember telling her like, this is the last rodeo. We're doing one last move,
Mm.
and we're done. But this has been a tough one,
Yeah.
so it
Interesting.
is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. That would be. I think it would be tough for me moving around a lot. That would be. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how I would handle that. But no, I could. I could
Well,
see that'd be tricky.
you have
Yeah.
what is, but
Yeah.
it's you have to.
Yeah. 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 You don't have a choice. You gotta.
What choice do you
Yeah.
have
Yep.
in that line of work? What
Mm-hmm.
choice do you have?
Yeah. So when I initially kind of made that post on Facebook about asking people if they would, come on my podcast for an interview, and you said you would, and I super appreciate that. Did you have, I guess, was there something that you're like, oh, I would think it'd be super cool to share this, or maybe is there a question that I didn't ask you of something that maybe you were excited to communicate, and maybe I just didn't ask the right question to give you the chance to communicate that. So I guess I'll kind of open it up. Does that make sense? Am I asking that right? Or
I think so.
okay.
So I mean, so initially
Mm-hmm.
the main reason why I've all is because I just started a podcast this year again with my
Sweet.
best friend, so
Yeah.
we're relatively new.
Yeah.
So I certainly know what it's like to uh, start, and
Mm-hmm.
we're certainly not a big show to be sure. but uh, it's kind of that, that empathy, which is like, hey, I know what it's like to be just starting out, and I think I might have something to contribute.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but I would certainly like to support somebody's efforts who's really out there trying to do the right thing. And I I like your stated goal here, and
Mhm.
I think you'll do well. And I think there's a market for thoughtful conversation, which is why I got into it myself.
Sweet.
And I appreciate you bringing me on the show,
Yeah.
and hopefully I didn't talk too much.
No, you
I'm
did
told
awesome.
I do that from time to time.
No, it was fantastic. I super appreciate it. It was great. And yeah, thank you, Roger, for coming on the podcast today.
Of course.
I've super enjoyed this conversation. I think it's very valuable, especially for other military dads out there. I think you have definitely a fantastic story, um, and not just to limit it to military dads, for all dads. But I think it's really cool hearing it from your perspective, and I super appreciate that. So thank you for coming on the Everyday Dad podcast, and that is a wrap for today. Well, guys, that is a wrap for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate it. Be sure to check out the show notes for any referenced information. And it would mean a lot to me if you would comment on and rate this podcast, as well as share this episode with a friend or family member. I'll catch you on the next one. And remember, Dad hard.